Hi, I'm Amanda Helfrey. I'm a student at Dakota State University, and I want to talk to you as parents um, about disabilities and special education. Special education is one of those things that you don't really understand until you actually face it, or else unless you're an actual teacher and you've gone through the process in the classes that you've learned about it. With this, I want to give you more clarification on what it's all about, and I want you to know your rights as a parent and what you can provide for your child. Um, for early learning for students with disabilities, John Locke cultivated the blank tablet because of his concern for harsh discipline. The blank tablet concept is thought as an infant having a clear slate for learning and shaping their mind. In the 1700s, John Mark Gaspard sought out new methods to teach those with mental challenges. Itard is a physician and an authority of diseases of the ear and education of the deaf. In the forests of Angevin, France, he found a boy that was naked and had no upbringing. He had attempted to raise and educate the child. Um, there were some behavioral changes in the boy, but he was unable to speak and live independently after the education process that Itard had brought him up as. Um, Along with that, different aspects of the world today brought up the legislation that led up to special education. And with that, our first one is Pennsylvania Association for Retarded Children. This was established in 1971. And you may notice in here I'm going to have some acronyms. And this is just an acronym for the Pennsylvania Association. With this, the association, this guy was a decision based on the 14th Amendment, in which it assures all children, including those with disabilities, the right to a free, appropriate education. Decisions such as one led to the passage of other important laws, like the rest of these, and many more that were brought up. The Vocational Rehabilitation Act, this one relates to the non-discrimination under federal grant that required students that are handicapped who are qualified handicapped individual in the United States shall solely by reason of this handicap shall not be excluded from participation in and be denied the benefits of or subjected to discrimination under any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. With that being said, students that are in the education process, whether it's a 504 or any other code, if your child is under a 504, the school must provide the services the child needs in order to make their environment and their education successful. So if your child is in a wheelchair and they require a ramp to get up to the school must provide that. And then the other equipment for the child to get through their day-to-day activities in school. The Americans with Disabilities Act, this one, in this, child care centers were designated as a public accommodations, which must be available to all who desire and use them. So if any disability that your child may have, just like the Vocational Rehabilitation Act, the school must provide the services to your child. All people in the Education for All Handicapped Children Act, all people between the ages 3 and 18 must be provided a free and appropriate public education. So if your child, this started in 1975, if your child has a disability, And according to their age and maturity and past achievements, the school must provide what's appropriate for your child's education. This is a very important, very, very important act as far as what your child is provided nowadays. The amendments of 1983 extended fiscal authorization for federal aid in state and local school systems through 1987. And then once that expired, amendments of 1986, infants and toddlers with disabilities, these two guys coincide with each other. And with this, infants and toddlers with handicaps and their families must be provided education. Okay. And now, who has a disability? These are different various categories of disabilities that any child may have, and I'm going to familiarize with these as we go along. Deaf and blind is pretty self-explanatory as to what it is. Emotional disturbance is where a child categories where they can't emotionally keep themselves under control. So say a child he gets angry, he or she gets angry really easily, but they can't control on calming themselves down. They would be considered underneath emotional disturbance. A cognitive disability is where a child, it's something that affects their brain cognitively, so they can't think of processes as easily as others can. Hearing loss is where they can't hear or they've lost their hearing at an early age, maybe because of sickness or developmentally they ended up losing their hearing. A specific learning disability is where the child is struggling in a specific subject in school, whether it's reading, math, or writing. Usually those three categories are covered underneath this 525 disability. Multiple disabilities would be anything of a mix of these guys or more. So if your child has more than one disability, say they can't walk, and they also have a learning disability, they would be underneath this guy. An orthopedic impairment would be anything physical. So if your child can't walk, they would need to be provided orthopedic assistance by the school and maybe possibly different therapies to help them out. Vision loss is where it's kind of similar to hearing loss, where they lose their vision from a sickness or developmentally they lose it throughout age. Sorry about that. Deafness, 545, is where you are born without hearing. Speech and language impairment is where the child has a hard time speaking verbally speaking, so they can't pronounce their words right or need extra help with speaking. And then language impairment is like if your child speaks more than one language but needs to learn English a little bit more, they would be underneath this to require more assistance on learning more English. Other health impaired is anything that's not underneath this. They would be underneath this if they have another disability. Autism is one of those disabilities that have been still being researched nowadays. And this is where it's significantly affecting verbal and nonverbal communication and then their social interactions with others. Children with autism have a hard time communicating and figuring out social cues from others. Traumatic brain injury is where a child ends up having an accident that involves the brain. So if they have a car accident at a young age and they had an injury to the brain, they would be underneath this to help them out with that disability. And then the last one, the 5